And thank you again, and without coming between you and the Minister, I will pass on to the Minister first, and he will update us with his message, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. I think we have got about 1 hour after this. Thank you very much. Here we go, sir.
Thank you. Kia ora tātou, good evening. Thank you, Via, and thank you all for the invitation to join you this evening and for coming out, probably after work and all the day's activities, to spend some time having a conversation this evening. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this. I think I'll keep my opening comments reasonably high level and short, and then we can get into a conversation, because I suspect many of you have come with specific questions and specific issues that you'd like to talk about. So I just want to kind of talk a little bit about this government's approach to immigration, and hopefully to give you some confidence that we still very much see immigration as an absolutely vital component of our community and of our society. A couple of the things that we've done in policy, and then we'll get into some of the detail stuff, some of the operational things that I assume you probably want to talk about. So I always say this wherever I go. New Zealand is a migrant nation. You know, we're kind of the last bit of land on the planet that humans occupy. Māori arrived here around 1,000 years ago. Europeans started arriving about 300, 250 years ago. And then for a period of time, we had a policy which I think was largely kind of, let's try and recreate England in the South Pacific. And that existed right up until 1987, when the Labour government at the time said, look, actually, we really need to open up our immigration system. It should be based on the skills that people bring, the skills that we need here in New Zealand, and it really shouldn't matter what part of the world that people come from. Sure, we'd had, I know people have been migrating to New Zealand from India for over a century now. We had people from the Pacific, we had people from other parts of the world, but we really in 1987 opened things up and said we're going to base our immigration system on skill. And I mean, I think if you look at the current numbers, with our economy remaining very strong, immigration is still an important part of our economy, in an important way that we grow our population. Really all our population growth comes from immigration these days, and we fill the jobs that are available that can't be filled by people here in New Zealand. But we have seen some areas that we felt we needed to do some work. And the two areas which are identified in the government's coalition agreement are, one, to make sure that the immigration system is delivering the people that we need with the skills that we need in the parts of the country where we need them. You're all here in Auckland, and Auckland is a wonderful place, but actually we need migrant workers in just about every other part of the country as well. And regional employers are always crying out for more workers, and I really think we need to continue the work to encourage people who migrate to New Zealand to think about settling, living and working in other parts of the country, not just here in Auckland, as much as this wonderful city has to offer. And the other thing that we focused on is migrant exploitation. It's just not right that some people are brought to New Zealand, often on a promise, with great expectations, and end up in situations where they're not paid properly, they don't get their leave, they work longer hours than their contract says they're supposed to. Sometimes they're coerced into working outside of their visa conditions, and that is then held over them by some unscrupulous employers. And for me, it's really important that people who migrate here, whether they come here on a temporary basis and ultimately decide to go back to the country that they arrived from, or on to another part of the world, or if they're people who go for residency and settle here and make New Zealand their home, that's a positive experience, and people have a genuine opportunity to build a strong career, to get ahead, have a family, have a home, all the things that we expect everybody in New Zealand to be able to enjoy. So we started with a series of changes to the temporary work visa system, and those are very much designed to ensure that employers are sound, that we have confidence that employers who are taking on migrants are not going to exploit them, that they have a good track record. To make sure that when we're considering things like the labour market test, that we take into account regional differences. And if we're talking about a part of the country, say Canterbury, for instance, where there really are very, very few local people available to fill the roles that are becoming available down there, that we have a more streamlined approach to immigration so that people can get access to the immigration system and are able to support the people that they need to fill those roles to come into New Zealand. And then finally, only once those things are sorted should we then be expecting a prospective migrant to make their application and go through the things like character test and health test. Because at the moment, when the migrant makes their application, that's the beginning of the process. And then we go and check the employer and we look at the job and what have you, and the poor person who wants to migrate to New Zealand sits there in the system while all of these things are being worked out. I think it makes much more sense to work those things out first, and then when the employer has the get-go, then they can go looking for a person. If they find the right person that they want, that person makes their application for their visa. But that's very much designed to try and help us with our work to tackle exploitation, and also to help us with our work to try and encourage people into other parts of the country where they are desperately needed. The other side is a piece of work that's very much focused on migrant exploitation. One of the things that we heard really loudly from people is, look, we people who are in exploitative situations often feel very, very fearful about coming forward because they worry about what it'll mean for their immigration status, they'll worry about what it means for their employment, their income. And so we actually went out towards the end of last year and consulted on 10 proposals which have been worked up not just by us in government, but we worked alongside a stakeholder group which had representatives of the migrant community, representative unions of businesses, of education providers and of international students, to develop a package of 10 proposals which are designed to, 1, prevent exploitation from happening, 2, to support migrants who are in an exploitative situation to come forward and give them the confidence that the consequences of that exploitation will actually be directed at the person who is doing the exploitation, not the worker. And finally, to make sure that we properly enforce our immigration and employment laws, and perhaps just putting a few more tools in our regulators' toolbox so that it's easier to identify the things which we know are associated with migrant exploitation and to do more about them more quickly. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to deliver on that package in the near future. Some of those proposals have budget implications, and we're just working through the budget at the moment. So I'll see how compelling a case I manage to make to my colleagues that we need to fund all of that work. So that's what we've been kind of focusing on at policy level. But I am aware over the last couple of years we have had some operational issues, and I suspect we'll get into some of the specifics of the questions that you'll come with. But I just want to make a comment about the visa processing times, because that is one thing which kind of sits over all the other things which have been raised. Visa processing times have actually been getting slower since 2014. And I am going to lay this at my predecessor. He just let that happen and nothing was done about it. There was no specific work focused on making sure that those processing times were maintained. So 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, they progressively got slower and slower. And I think we got to a point where it became untenable, and where actually visa processing was taking sufficiently long that people felt the need to speak up about it. What also happened is that a massive restructure of immigration, New Zealand, was planned, and that restructure involved the closing of a lot of their offshore offices, bringing a lot of the visa processing back here to New Zealand, and consolidating a lot of that work with a view to getting more consistency in decision making, which is something that we heard very loudly from people, that they saw many of the decisions that Immigration New Zealand was making being quite inconsistent, and we needed to work hard to make sure that there was more consistency there. Now those were all really good plans, But what happens, of course, is when you close offices and you let go of a lot of people who have got a lot of institutional knowledge, and then you replace them with new people who need to be trained up, that period where you're training people up, you're going to lose some productivity. And that has had an impact on visa processing times as well. So I kind of, I suppose, lost my patience with this by about June last year, and said to Immigration New Zealand, you need to report to me on a weekly basis what you are doing to improve visa processing times and what impact that is having. And I can say that since then, we've seen significant improvement in the processing of essential skills visas, significant improvement in student and visitor visa processing as well. The two areas that are outstanding as far as I'm concerned are partnership visas, which are going very, very slowly, and the residency visas. Now the residency, we're dealing with another issue as well, which is we're actually issuing visas at essentially the same rate as we have been for many, many years, but we've got a huge volume of people applying. So Immigration New Zealand made over 1 million decisions in the last financial year, which is an absolute record, and they'll make another record number of decisions in this financial year, I would think, notwithstanding something I'm about to talk about. And so what we've seen is, as they've been processing them at the same number, but the number of people coming into the residency application stream growing, we've seen that tail blow out, and we've now got people waiting more than 12 months, maybe up to 15 months, for their residency application to be considered. I'm not satisfied with that. I think we should get it back down below 12 months. This longer than 12 months is quite normal in a lot of other countries, but I don't think it has to be the norm here in New Zealand. I'd like to see that processing time come down. Just at the beginning of this week, we announced a change to the way that we prioritise residency visas. So up until now, the prioritisation has been people earning more than twice the median income, so that's people earning more than 104,000. People who are in registered occupations, so doctors, teachers, nurses, etc. And people on the work to residence program. Now, and what was happening was the priority queue was getting processed, but everybody who wasn't in the priority queue, no processing was happening, so people were just stuck in that queue. The change we've made is to focus the prioritisation on those high wage people, so again 104,000 plus, and the registered occupations, teachers, doctors and nurses. Those are our priority queue. We're removing the work to residence applications from the priority queue. But what immigration will also be doing is taking applications from both queues. So the priority queue, kind of gets you into a shorter queue. If you're in the non-priority queue, you're in a longer queue, but they will both keep moving. So that at least people who aren't in the priority side at least can know that we will move things along, and it might take a while, but we will get to you. I can understand why people felt like there was no chance of their application even being considered if they were sitting in a queue that wasn't moving at all. So a little change that we've made there. The other thing which I do need to talk about is, in the midst of all of this, grappling with all of these issues, and just when it kind of felt like we were getting somewhere, we've got the coronavirus. Now that obviously has implications for Immigration New Zealand because we're running a travel ban on some people, and that means more processing at the border and work that has to be done to make sure that people are not boarded onto planes coming into New Zealand if they're subject to that travel ban. It also means, unfortunately, that our office in Beijing is currently closed, and we don't know how long it will be closed for. Now, Beijing has 150 staff, and I think 130 of those are immigration officers who work on visa processing. Now, notwithstanding the fact that obviously some of the applications that come out of China, we're just not processing them because those people are subject to the ban. Beijing, deals with visitor visas and student visas from all around the Asia region, and that work has had to be redistributed across the network. Immigration are being pretty strategic about that. They're being thoughtful about who they can take off processing other visas to start working on the Beijing visas without causing too much grief to the processing times in other categories. But there's no way you can take that many people out of our system and not expect there to be some kind of impact. So they are working extremely hard to minimise that impact. But I'm afraid, I think over the next few months we will see something else negatively impacting those visa processing times, which unfortunately is completely out of our hands. But everybody is working very, very hard to manage it as well as we can. And I just want to be upfront with you about that, because I know people just need to know what they can expect in terms of how long it will take to process a visa. I know that's one of the most frustrating things, when you think it will take a certain amount of time and then it takes much longer. So let's just be honest about the fact that we've got more challenges in that space. So it's great to hear that there's been more engagement. That is something that I specifically asked Immigration New Zealand to do. I don't know if Matt Hoskin is the person that, so Matt has been tasked with this job of actually getting out and talking to people who are directly impacted or represent communities or are part of families who are directly impacted by the decisions that Immigration New Zealand make. And I think that's having a big impact, certainly helping Immigration New Zealand understand some of the nuances of some of the needs of our various communities. And it helps him, it helps them as well, explain a lot more about the processes that they have to work on. I actually visited the Manukau office this morning. I've been there a couple of times. We had a look at a couple of residency visa applications, and some of them, they can be massive, massive piles of paperwork that the immigration officers have to work their way through, and that can take quite a bit of time to do that thoroughly and properly. But anyway, that's just a snapshot of some of the policy work we've been doing and some of the operational things that we've faced over the last couple of years. I know that there will be lots of things that you want to raise specifically, so I think now's a good time to hand over to you, and we'll have a bit of a conversation.
So how we'll run it is that we want to ask questions, make it as short as possible so that more people get an opportunity, please. So I'll pass this mic, and who is going to be number one? Firstly, I wanted to let the Minister know, thank you again. And we gave Matt a very hard time.
Good.
But please convey that he was fantastic.
Right.
We didn't get him because we thought he will get bloated, so we didn't get him. But thank you. He was absolutely brilliant along with the whole team. Good. Thank you. Who is first? Yes. The question, please.
Hi, good evening, sir. My first question is, if a child is on special needs and has been here in New Zealand for past 12 years, they did the application for residency in 2013, but was declined because the son was autism. And they said there's no rule like he can get residency because the son is autism. But like after that, even the child, other children who are on the wheelchair, disabled, they got the residency. And the family who applied again, they said no. After 2013. In 2018, the family did the residency again, and they were told that the family can't get the residency. And I just want to know why it says, yeah, he can't get the residency, and after that, the other children who are disabled, who can't even work, they get the residency here. And the family, only the son is autism. Why can't they get the residency?
Look, I can't speak to individual circumstances, so if you're aware of people who have a health condition who have been able to get a visa, I just don't know the details of how that has happened. But what we do have is a rule around people having an acceptable standard of health, and it's pretty blunt, but it's based on what we expect the cost of providing their care over their life will be to the New Zealand health system, and it's people who kind of present maybe the top 5 to 10% of costs who are usually deemed to be not of an acceptable standard of health. So that rule is applied, and it depends entirely on the specific set of individual circumstances that are included in the application. And so I don't know why an immigration officer made one decision about one person and a different decision about another person, but there is a requirement to ensure that a person is of an acceptable standard of health, and that's quite a normal requirement around most countries that have an immigration system in place. It can feel a little harsh sometimes, I acknowledge that, but it is there to ensure that if we provide people the opportunity to stay in New Zealand permanently, that they're not going to present a higher than reasonable burden to the health system. It's a tough one, I know, but it is quite a common rule.
Next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway, for making a sincere effort to accommodate your concerns.
Loud, please, loud.
Is it on? Hello?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Cool. Well, I'm in a situation. I've applied for my residency application a year ago, and we have been patiently waiting. But as I heard you speak, you've kind of made it clear where we stand. I'd like to make a couple of points. It's because I know a lot of people in my friend circle and my acquaintances, so they're in a similar situation, because there's a lot of things on hold, because in terms of buying a house, or just to give an example, I live in Ellerslie. I've been paying rent for past 2 years. Today morning I totaled the amount, it's coming up to 65,000. So we have the down payment ready, and we are waiting to buy a house, and since we don't have the PR and there are a lot of issues and things, it is just the ambiguity which is kind of, it's a very stressful situation. Planning to have a family, there are a lot of things on stake, so just that.
Yeah, look, I mean, I appreciate all of that, and as I say, I'm not satisfied with how long it's taking to process those visas at the moment, and I'm hopeful that we've made a very minor change at the moment. I think there's an opportunity to make some small policy changes, and if we get re-elected, I think there's a bigger piece of work that needs to be done around how the residency policy actually functions. But look, all I can really do is sympathise.
I also read the latest
totally
news.
Understand.
I also read the latest news, just came yesterday, and I was a little relieved.
Good. Well,
applications are being picked from the other pool as well.
Again, we'll see. So it'll get things moving. It's not going to go lightning fast, but it will keep things moving. And I hope it gives you a little bit of hope that whilst the non-priority queue may go a little slower, at least it's going rather than completely stopped. And it's for exactly the reasons that you've raised that we need to make some move on.
Thank you.
Yep. Next.
Hi. So I just came in about 10 past, so you might have addressed this, so apologies if you did. Just kind of a question on the parental category thing that's just been opened up again. Just wanted to get an idea of what the backlogs are currently, or the timelines, because I guess it was closed for a while, for a couple of years. And also, can you just talk to some of the rationale behind some of the income requirements, if possible?
Yeah. So, actually, I'm not clear exactly what the processing time might look like on those at the moment, because we have just reopened it, and I guess first and foremost, INZ will be going through the applications they had in the system to see which ones meet the new criteria. But that is something that we could have a look into, Joy, and we could come back through and get that information passed back to you. In terms of the rationale, well, if you don't mind, I'm going to tell a little story. So let's go back to when it was closed, right? So it got closed by the national government because there were lots of stories swirling around about how either people would sponsor their parents to come to New Zealand and then wouldn't provide them with the resources, the money they need to take care of themselves, and the parents would end up on welfare, or that the migrant would sponsor their parents and then immediately leave the country, go to Australia or something, and leave their parents stranded in New Zealand. Now, I think we all knew at the time that those were stories, and there wasn't a heck of a lot of evidence to back them up, but the previous government got a bit spooked and decided to put a temporary ban in place. It also helped them to get their residency numbers down, which they were kind of, they suddenly became keen on, again, when there was a bit of noise around this stuff. The research was done. Of course, it became absolutely clear that, you know, whilst you may have the odd individual case, overwhelmingly, when people sponsored their parents to come to New Zealand, they took care of them. And the evidence is really clear that particularly amongst highly skilled migrants, the people that we're in competition with other countries to attract and retain, that if you're able to bring your parent or your parents to New Zealand, you're more likely to stay. And that's a good thing. So when all that came back in, I made it a priority to get the thing reopened. In a coalition government, everything's a negotiation. And it's fair to say that I faced a bit of scepticism about this particular policy. And I'm not kind of speaking out of school now because the cabinet paper that I proposed is now publicly available. And so I proposed that we reopen at a lower income threshold, starting at 1.5 times the median wage, because I do believe we need an income threshold. We do need people to be able to demonstrate that they can take care of their parents. And for a single migrant sponsoring one parent would start at 1.5 times the median wage and you know, ratchet up accordingly according to how many parents you wanted to bring or whether you're a couple, etc. And that was my proposal. I wasn't able to get that through cabinet. And in order to get the thing reopened for at least some people, we agreed to higher thresholds. And that was the consensus that got the cabinet across the line. Because I'm here as Minister tonight and speaking on behalf of the government, I can't really speak on behalf of the Labour Party. But as Minister, let me do a little bit of crystal ball gazing and say I wouldn't be surprised if political parties take a view on this going into the next election. So watch that space.
Thank you. Next.
I have been queued, so I'll keep you
How quickly are we processing that queue?
I think you already touched bases in your comments that if you get re-elected, and also so if you get re-elected, as you said, it's a coalition government, so you don't have full control. But I want to ask you a question. If you get re-elected in coalition, will you be acting in a hierarchical manner that if Labour is in power, they have a right to tell off your minister, not to ramble about other communities, you know, like you got a good respect for local indigenous people, also local island people like Fijians and some on the Cook Islands. Why can't you have similar respect for people from India? Thank you.
Well, I think the Prime Minister made it abundantly clear that the government does have respect for people from India and people who migrate to New Zealand from all parts of the world. Look, the truth is, we have an MMP system that delivers us multi-party government, and some government coalition management issues are easier than others. But you can take my assurance that as Minister for Immigration, and I speak for the government on immigration matters, that we absolutely respect our migrant communities and we respect what you bring to our economy and what you bring to our society. We are much stronger for being a multicultural society. And as a trading nation, we're much stronger for having links with all parts of the world, with people coming and living here from all parts of the world. So you have my assurance and you have the Prime Minister's assurance that this government and any future governments that involve the Labour Party will be entirely respectful of our migrant communities and will acknowledge the contribution that we make to New Zealand.
Hello. Thank you, Minister, for your time here. Actually, you just spoke about parental policy, and there's very likelihood that when the parents come, possibly they will be burdened with the welfare system. But the thing is that you see, instead of getting into those areas, I spoke to when Matt was here, and I expressed that at that time also, that why not to provide a long-term visas for a visitor visa? Instead of, you see, then what will happen? The children, they are frustrated. They are really, really frustrated, and they don't know what's going to happen because they can't get to that threshold. If they can't get to that threshold, how stressed they will be. And they are, connected with their parents, and they don't want to leave them there. Why not we do something? At that time, in that case, they will not be a burden to the New Zealand volunteer. They'll be simply here till they can be, as long as they got a visa. And we all know that a visitor cannot go to a bench and get any kind of benefit. So I think it will be very easy and simpler solution than restricting people on the basis of their threshold. And they are really frustrated because I work with the grassroots level, and I do represent a very large senior citizen group, and I know that how much problems they are facing at the moment. So please consider that and think what we can do. I've got another question, but please answer this one. There's another question which I will connect it with you just mentioned about the migrant exploitation. Have you, I think that the immigration also had to think about the employer exploitation. I'm really very curious about it. The reason is that a lot of employers, they have been exploited. When the migrants, they need something and they will accept any condition. And I want to know why they had to wait for months and years before they can go to the labor department and claim all these holiday pay and long hours work and large complaint about employers. So if they have got a question, they've got a problem, they should come up straight and say, okay, this person is employer is exploiting. Then do something about it. Thank you.
That's a long-winded question.
I've got a short answer to the first bit, which is I think it's an interesting proposal, and we will consider it. It's not something that will progress in this term, but it's something that's worth having to think about. In terms of the second one, look, I mean, I come from the point of view, and this is a Labour Party point of view, that there is an inherent imbalance between the employer and the employee. And I think that imbalance can often be even stronger when the employee is a migrant, because they're also worried about their migration, their visa status, right? So it can be very, very hard for them to come forward. So we do create allowances for people to be able to come forward after a period of time and identify issues with their employment. Of course, in the first instance, I'm a union guy. I came from the unions before I was in Parliament. Always say the first thing you should do if you've got an issue is talk to your employer. Right? We always say that. But that can be a real challenge for people sometimes. And actually, I think it's incumbent on employers to know the law, to understand their obligations, and to make sure that they are implementing the law correctly. I hear from a lot of people, I didn't know that's what the law was, or I didn't know where to find the information. The MB website is a beautiful thing. It's got all the resources that you need. If you're unsure about how to build an employment agreement, you're unsure what your responsibilities are as an employer around leave, sick pay, holiday pay, bereavement leave, go to the MB website. It's all there. Make sure you're doing it right.
Kira Minister, just want to check, how you have visas like skilled migrant visa at the moment, essential skill visa. I know so many people who have married recently, but they're not eligible to get their partners over here, although they have a valid visa. Is there a way you guys can get an assurance from these guys that you will be responsible for your partners, as we do on visitor visas, for everything, but let them live together? Or something, because they're not able to bring their partners over here. I've seen so many people who are newly married, but their partners are staying overseas because of that. So I really want you to look into this aspect of it.
Can I ask you, particularly talking about culturally arranged marriages?
No, no.
So what's the? I'm not actually sure I know what the issue is. So they're applying for a partnership visa based on marriage.
Yes, so they have the essential skill visa.
Yes.
And they're applying for the visa basis on the marriages, but their visa was declined because your skill level is not that and your annual income is not that. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so I think, and I might be wrong, and if I'm wrong, we can perhaps talk about it offline. But for people who have been on, who have been considered lower skilled on the essential skills visa, they have not been able to bring family members, whether it's partners or children. That is one of the changes that we have made. It hasn't been implemented yet, but one of the policy changes that we made was to scrap that rule. We were very concerned about people being separated from their families unnecessarily, and so people who are on lower skilled, essential skills visas will be able to apply to bring their family as well. Now their partners won't be able to work unless they qualify for a work visa themselves, but they will be able to come and live here in New Zealand with their working partner.
Oh, thank you very much.
So since I'm holding the mic, I'll drop in my question. Do you think going through the immigration agents prioritizes the hire, or just go online and save some money?
Not in of itself. Obviously, an agent knows the system, knows the information which is going to help you submit a complete application. One of the huge problems that Immigration New Zealand has with trying to process applications is receiving incomplete applications and then having to go back and forth with the applicant to get all the information that they need, because the clock starts ticking as soon as that application is made. And so, a long decision can be partially because information is being gathered by the immigration officer. So the advisor should be able to help with that. But what can I say? Shop around, make sure that you're using a reputable advisor. Not all of them are. And make sure that you're paying a reasonable fee for the services that they provide. But it is possible for someone to make their application online without using an advisor, but I would encourage people to take the time to make sure that they're providing all the information that they need, because leaving something out will only slow things down.
Yeah, at the back. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, actually what happened last year, I applied for my mom visa on parental category, the visitor visa. Immigration has provided 3 years multiple parent visa, but they give each visit she can stay up to maximum of 1 month. She is 76-year-old. She all the way come from India to here, and it's only 1 month. How, I don't know how come they give just 1 month.
Again, it's impossible for me to speak to individual circumstances and the information that they've used to make that decision. But it'll be, I have no idea what it is, but it'll be something in the application that they feel that's the appropriate response.
She'll be here before actually.
Yeah.
And it's a very surprise to, it's 76 years old.
Yeah.
You give just 1 month multiple visa for 3 years. What's the use?
Yeah, I understand, but as I say, I can't speak to individual circumstances.
So we have got a communication link with Matt, so we can write to Matt and we can process this.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
So you owe him one now.
Hello, Minister. I'm Gopal Nair. It's a privilege. I am a researcher in law at AUT right now. I'm doing my PhD there. So this, although it's a personal case, but it has got a larger question to it. I applied. I'm doing my research in disability policy in AUT. So I opted for the job of a disability services officer in Auckland, and I've been working there along with my research. And it's going on well. I applied for residency. I was matching all the criteria. The case officer said that my hand school level is not matching. I gave explanations and stuff. Recently, there has been an amendment, a change which has come in the hand school level, which says that personal care assistants, because the case officer said that my skill level matches that of a personal care assistant. After the recent amendment, it says personal care assistants are also in the SMC, the skill migrant category. I've been trying to reach out to the case officer to take a decision, but it hasn't been, actually practicalized. And the case officer is saying that it might take a lot more time. The application was, the case officer was allotted in September 2018, and it's been almost 1.5 years, more than that. So we're just trying to know what is the time period of implementation of such policy changes or amendments, if something like that comes.
Sure. So in terms of your individual circumstance, that could be another good one to work with Matt on. Look, the ANSCO thing is a real challenge. Right? So we've already made, the changes to the ANSCO list. The ANSCO list is actually something that I'm not responsible for. It belongs to Stats New Zealand. And we just use it as a tool in the immigration system. It's not a great tool for the reasons that you've identified, that sometimes different occupations can be kind of incorrectly assessed on the ANSCO list. And then the other problem that we have is often people will claim that a particular role is, an occupation. And immigration will look at the responsibilities and they'll say, no, actually we think it's something which is further down here, and you get haggling between the applicant or the advisor and the immigration officer. So in the essential skills, the temporary work visas, we've actually said we're getting rid of ANSCO. And it's another blunt tool, but it is probably a better tool, which is we're going to base the sort of skill differentiation based on income. And so basically what we're saying to employers is, if you value this person, you can't find someone to do this job from within New Zealand, and you want this person to be able to stay in New Zealand, you don't want them to have to go back home, show them that you value them by paying them properly. And that's a little bit easier to assess than the ANSCO list. Now, I am pontificating now, so this is not government policy. But I wonder if when we look at the residency program and skilled migrant category, whether we can try and rely a little less on ANSCO and rely on some other things, like looking more at the qualifications the person has, or what the salary is for the role, or what have you. Because ANSCO, it does slow the process down. It can be very subjective. And it can be gamed as well. And we'd like to take opportunities to game the system out as much as possible, so that genuine applicants who put the effort in to providing all the correct information are able to make their way through the system. So look, you raise a good point, and I think maybe down the track there might be an opportunity to do some work around that. Thank you.
Hi. So I work for a government organization, and two of my friends and me together, we've done masters in construction management, which is under the skill, which is level 9 course over here.
Yep. And
then we're working for the government organization, which is again a skill category. So we applied for our skilled migrant visa, and we got our EOI sorted, and without any delay, we just applied for the visa like in 20 days. Like we got it accepted in October, we applied it in November. So it's going to be 6 months now, and no case officer has been assigned. And last week or 2 weeks back, we just came through a news saying that there's something called queue process, and there's something called case batch declining. So it's been 6 months now, and it's a general fear that we get it. Like, what if they just push off our applications just like that?
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, but that's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, but then it's already being told that it's been 10 months. I mean, the minimum, the time is 10 months for an application to be, clear, and it's already 6 months now. And we lodged our documents in less than 20 days after the EOI was accepted, and we made sure that all the documents were, given. Like, not even one was missed. We know about it because we did it so fast. So my question is, it's been 6 months now, and why has no case officer been assigned? And what can you do from your end,
Yeah, so this is the same set of issues as we were talking about earlier on. Immigration New Zealand are dealing with far greater volume of residency applications than they were expecting to be at this point.
No. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Because the same place that we work in, we had 2 more people, I don't want to name them, we had 2 more people who applied, and they got their resident visa in 1 month. So it's kind of weird because we have applied, the moment we got our EOI, we applied and we did not even wait. And then there are people who applied later and then they got their visa in 1 month and we've been waiting for 6 months and we're working in the same place.
Yeah, so we were talking earlier on about how we have a priority queue and a non-priority queue. And the non-priority queue has just not been moving. And yeah, we've made changes this week to actually make sure that non-priority queue moves as well. So, you know, as I say, Immigration New Zealand is dealing with far higher volumes of residency applications than they were expecting to be dealing with at this point in time. That has meant that even though they've been processing them at basically the same rate as they've ever been processing them, the number coming into the queue means that it's taking longer to get assigned to an immigration officer and for the process to happen. And we are, you know, we've had Immigration New Zealand have made that operational policy change around the prioritisation. I'm looking at the moment at what we might do in the short term around the policy, and in the longer term, I think there's a much more holistic piece of work that needs to be done around residency in general. I appreciate your frustration. It's frustrating for me too. But I can also assure you that we're focused on this, and Immigration New Zealand is doing what they can. I'm looking at what I can do from a policy perspective. I do want to get those wait times down. I think, you know, if we could get the longest someone has to wait down to below 12 months, that would be quite a good achievement. You know, we're working towards it. But in the meantime, hang in there. And I totally understand your frustration for all the reasons this gentleman raised about, you know, things that you're waiting to be able to do when you get residency. I do get it, and we're working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. A flip side to that, with the coronavirus, Beijing is slow. So in-house applications, would they be turned out faster?
In-house applications?
I mean, people who are here, already here, and they've put in their application, would they expect that they would be looked into faster because?
Right. No, I would say that's unlikely, to be honest. And primarily, I would say that 80% of skilled migrant applications come from people who are already in New Zealand. Only 20% come from outside of New Zealand. And in order to get your points, because of course, you guys will all know you get more points for having worked and studied in New Zealand. So in order to get your points to apply from offshore, there's actually a pretty good chance that you're very highly skilled and in a registered occupation. It means likely that those people are going to go into those priority queues as a result of that. And I make no apologies for that. There are particular occupations that are absolutely in demand, and we are in quite a lot of competition with other countries to attract those people. And we need to make sure that our residency program is focused on those people that we really do need to attract. For people who are in New Zealand, notwithstanding the frustrations that you guys have mentioned, I would say you're here, you can work, you can live here, and we're working you through the system as quickly as we can. But I support the way that Immigration New Zealand is prioritising those applications. We need to have doctors, nurses, teachers. Those are the main roles. You look at the top 10 roles that are in the priority queue. They're almost all some form of that. So they're aged care nurse, surgical nurse, medical nurse, surgeon, doctor, primary school teacher, secondary school teacher, early childhood teacher. Those are the roles that are being prioritised, and we're in desperate need to attract those people.
Thank you, Minister, for coming. I think if we sum up the problem we are having is two problems: efficiency and humanitarianism. So those are the two ingredients missing in the whole thing. And I lived here long enough to know that, and I see the standard slip. I've been here over half a century, so not short term. So
longer than me.
So I've seen it, how the system has slipped, and because it's a user-based system, I think you need to up the game a little bit and spend money what it takes. And I don't think these people are complaining about how much fees they are paying. All they're complaining about how much time it's taking.
Sure.
And we be kind to them and put them out of their misery, because it's too hard to live with this misery to know, are we going to get somewhere or we not. So bring the humanitarianism back into the system, which New Zealand always had. And that's all I request. I'm not going to carry on telling you, because you know the problem.
I'll say two things. I spend a lot of time in the immigration offices, and I have to say those people are dedicated, and they understand what their job is. They understand the impact on people's lives of the work that they do. The other interesting thing about immigration officers is they're probably the most diverse multicultural officers anywhere in the country. The people from your community, people from the Chinese community, people from the Filipino community are working in there as well, and they understand what the impact of their decision means. I think there's a lot of humanity in the system. We'll try for more, I agree, but it's quite interesting when you actually meet people face to face. They understand that. They also understand the need to make sure that they're not putting people into exploitative situations, that they're not allowing fraud to occur, and it's a really tough balance for them to make. On your point about the fees, well, actually one of the first things I had to do when I first became minister was put the fees up, because the previous government basically was just letting Immigration New Zealand get into debt, and there was no way we could sustain that continuing on happening. So we had to raise the fees just to cover the work that they're doing now. But that is interesting to hear. Interesting to hear
I
what
don't think
people's
anyone
views
would
around
complain
fees.
here if they had to pay another $200 to get their application process filed, or $500. But they are worried that they can't make decisions.
Yeah, we will certainly. So as part of the changes that we've made to the essential skills system, that requires quite an IT build to support that. And at that point in time, we are going to have to reassess the fees to make sure that we're continuing to pay for everything that Immigration New Zealand can do. It actually reminds me of another thing that's worth mentioning, which is that there is a lot of work going into trying to automate the easier decisions. When I say easier decisions, I mean probably about 70% of the decisions. With online applications, we're actually at the point where we could build an AI system that could look at those applications and make a decision. Now, one thing that we always say is that the computer should only be able to say yes. But you don't want a computer arbitrarily, deciding that you can't get your visa. So for those easy, straightforward decisions, we automate that. And I've got to be honest, we're talking 2 or 3 years away before we can seriously think that this might start happening. But if we automate those decisions, then we can get the people focusing on the more challenging decisions, making better decisions, hopefully, and making faster decisions too. And hopefully that might actually have a positive impact on fees in the long run.
If we put those 20% cases which are in trouble in a different basket and let them treat somewhere, I don't know.
Well, they already do some of this. So the other thing that's happening right now
let the 80% go in.
Yeah. So as I say, if we can automate some of that, we can get that moving more quickly. But also, Immigration New Zealand already do a risk profile of every application, and low risk ones, they get prioritised and they move through. It's the high risk ones that are taking the longest time. But they've only just introduced that, and that's had a negative impact on the overall times as well, because they are saying there are some applications we have to look at harder.
That's okay.
Everywhere I go, people say that's okay.
That's
no problem
okay.
with that. Yeah.
No problem.
And it's also done to try and keep the other ones moving faster. But yeah, there's always more that we could do.
What I've been hearing here, that most of the people are feeling victims. And that's the problem. If they know one way or another, they will be quite happy with it.
Yeah, I understand.
Thank you.
Yes, this gentleman's been waiting for a long time.
Okay, I came to New Zealand like 3 years back, and now I intend to make this New Zealand my home. In the last 3 years, I've seen changes 3 times. Every year I've seen changes. And it's been like, I try to work to get my residency in one way, and then the changes happen, and then again, I have to go to another, I have to just work around again. I just want to ask you one thing. You said that if you come again in power, then you will overhaul the residence whole process, residency, still migrant category. So what are those things you are thinking about? What are those changes you are thinking about? Something you have in mind. What are you thinking about? Second question. You said there is a wait time of 15 months. In a scenario, if somebody is like put their skilled migrant category application, the EOI, and it got accepted, but their current visa ran out. So what is the thing, what they can do? Because now it's 15 months, it's not 12 months. So what they can do, and if it goes up, is there a provision that they don't have to get stressed about that thing because they'll get kicked out? Still they got, because they are eligible to get like.
Well, look, I mean, it sounds a little bit rough, but the first thing I would say is, if your temporary visa is expiring, but you've had your EOI accepted, if you've amassed enough points to get your EOI accepted, your temporary, if you reapply for a temporary visa, it's more than likely going to be accepted because you're obviously sufficiently highly skilled to get, so you can feel very confident that you would get that. We are having a think about what we might need to do around interim visas and things to support people. There's nothing in place yet, but as I say, first port of call, reapply for a new visa. I know there's cost and time that comes with that, but you can be very confident if that you'll get it reissued. In terms of what comes in the future, look, I wouldn't want to speculate at this point in time what we might want to do. But in my mind, the residency program needs to be focused on getting timely decisions for the people who meet the criteria that we set for being able to get residency. And one thing I've tried to do as minister, and it's not always easy, what I've tried to do as much as possible is kind of what we call grandparent provisions, so that if you came to New Zealand under one set of rules, that we don't change the rules on you too many times. And if we're going to change the rules for people in the future, that you get to. But it's a bit tricky when you're moving from, because we don't make a promise when you get an essential skills visa. We don't make a promise that you'll get residency. And so it is a bit tricky to grandparent those provisions when actually what you're doing is making a new application. But once you make an application, once you've had an EOI accepted, then I think we should do everything we can not to change the rules on you then, because you're in the system. Set new rules for people in the future, absolutely. So one thing that we did with students with their post-study work visas, and we said, in the future, if you want to get the full 3 years that most people are getting before, you have to get a bachelor's degree or higher. If you're below bachelor's, then you'll only get 1 year. But a lot of people were already in the country thinking that they were going to get 3 years. And so we said, look, you guys, you all get 3 years. And we'll start new for the new people coming in. And I would take the same approach as much as possible. But there is that challenge, where if you're actually here on one visa and you're applying for a new visa, then really you have to apply under the rules at the time when you apply for that new visa.
Yep.
Hello, Minister. My question is that some of the students who are coming here to study, they are getting work permits on the basis that they have got a job offers from government agencies, and the government agencies are giving them permanent work for these people who are here on student permits, and they are depriving their people who are in New Zealand of work opportunities. I used to work at a tertiary education provider, it's a statutory one, Tier 1 and Tier 1. I developed their diploma in IT level 5. They got me from the first years to work. And we only, as you know, we only take domestic students in Te Waranga, and we try to provide all the resources for them. But the students come back to us and they say there's not enough job opportunities when we graduate, because the government agencies are hell-bent on trying to give work to migrants. For example, places like contact centers in government agencies, and the immigration is approving work permits for people after that. So they are getting like those sort of things, and we are having our New Zealand students who are citizens here, etc. Because I was in that position, now they've just established the course remotely. We used to offer it in 6 locations around New Zealand, and I was developing the Bachelor of IT course for them, and also some business courses. These students, they say that even we try to get a job in the contact center or the service desk or something, they are getting people from overseas to work in the government agency. So it's very difficult for them in those situations. So, and working in a contact center in IRD or Stats New Zealand or any other contact center doesn't require a lot of skills, I guess. It's a contact center.
Sure. Look, I can't necessarily make a comment about government versus non-government employers. What I can say is the changes that we've made to the essential skills visas will place a lot more onus on employers to be able to demonstrate what they have done to get New Zealanders into work. So there's going to be 3 levels of employer accreditation. So employers who employ a small number of migrants each year, less than 5, it'll be pretty straightforward. It'll be basically, you know, are you good? Yeah, do you pay your taxes? Do you meet your employment obligations? Do you meet your immigration obligations? Have you come to the attention of any of the authorities? Basically, doing things right, you're okay. Then there's a group of employers. Now, it's a smaller group of employers, a much smaller group of employers than the first lot, but it's the group of employers that actually employs the bulk of migrants on temporary work visas. Probably a lot of the ones that you're talking about. You've got large-scale operations and you're employing a lot of migrant workers, you'll fall into this category. Now, for them, they're going to have to demonstrate what they're doing around training, what they're doing around career progression, what they're doing around wages to make the jobs more attractive to people in New Zealand. That will be a lot more rigorous than it is at the moment. And so those expectations will be put in place. And if they can't demonstrate what they are doing to attract New Zealanders to that work, in particular what they are doing to provide, especially if they're a job that a lot of people use as their first job out of university or whatever, then yeah, they will really need to demonstrate what they are doing to create opportunities for young people to get into that role. If they can demonstrate that, they can still demonstrate that there's a shortage, yes, okay, they can have access to the immigration system. I don't think that bit's really working that well at the moment. And that's what that policy change is designed to fix. That hasn't been implemented yet, because as I say, Immigration New Zealand need to build up the IT systems to be able to work this process. Once they have that in place, we'll get that accreditation in place, and I think that'll make a big difference.
We'll have the last question, please.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You have time for 3 more? I've got 2 in the queue, so it's your call, please.
Go on there. We'll have just 3 more. Yes.
Let's make a question.
And I'll answer them really quickly.
Thank you. Minister, just like to ask you, your recent visit to India.
Yes.
If you could just quickly elaborate on what discussions or visa. And the second question is, another quick one. There are many here who are actually New Zealand born Indian.
Yeah.
But there are many here who have come from India, have families there, and if there's a wedding in their family and they apply for a visa for a member of the family to come here, the visas are declined. Can you just say on that, Grants?
Sure. Well, I can't speak to individual cases, but often visitor visas are declined if Immigration New Zealand is concerned that there's a risk that people will overstay. So, you know, and this is no reflection necessarily on people as individuals, but they're looking at the information that they've got available to them. So they look at things like, what family do they have to go back to back at home? What job do they have to go back to back at home? What investments? Do they own property? You know, those things that are going to pull them back home. And alongside a range of other risk factors, you know, if you're coming from a country that's experiencing civil war or, you know, or drought, or, you know, so things that might encourage people to want to overstay and remain in New Zealand unlawfully. So they do that kind of risk assessment, and that is sometimes involved in decisions not to grant people visitor visas. Now, I can't speak to individual circumstances, but sometimes that's the kind of thing that's in the So, you know, what to overcome that, yeah, it's useful to know that if you can demonstrate that someone's got you know, a lot of good reasons to want to go back home again, include that in the applications to support that. I'm trying to remember what your first question was. Yeah, look, I mean, it was pretty straightforward conversations. I went along and said, come on guys, part of the team, we've got to get these visas moving along. You know, really encourage you to do all that you can to make sure that the processing works in a timely fashion. And what they did, which was very helpful for me, is sat me down and we went through the kinds of applications that they have to deal with. What I found really interesting is that, and you guys will know far more about this than me, But the different kind of practices, the different kind of accepted cultural norms in different states in India mean that the types of applications you get can be quite different from different parts of the country. It was really great to sit down and talk to local people with local knowledge who said, look, this, you might look at this and you've got 27 different bank accounts with tiny little amounts of money in them or whatever, and I would look at that and I go, man, that looks dodgy. And they go, no, but this came from Gujarat, and that makes total sense, that coming from Gujarat. Now, if it came from somewhere else, I can't remember where they named, we might think that was a bit weird. But, but then you look at that and you go, this immigration officer has to go through every single one of those bank accounts and verify that information is correct. Now he could really speed things up by just saying, I'm not going to deal with that, decline. But actually wants to give that person a chance, and he goes through that and he works it all out, and he was pretty confident he was going to approve that one. So it was a really good kind of opportunity just to have a conversation, for me to say, this is what I'm hearing from the community in New Zealand, from the Indian community in New Zealand, so please take note of that, guys. But for them to be able to say, well, here's the reality of what we're facing as well. We actually had Paul Patel from the Indian Central Association was up in Mumbai as well at the same time, and he got the opportunity. He found it really interesting, just again sitting down with people and seeing what the reality is that they're working on.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're a very patient man.
Hello, Minister. Thank you so much for your time. So, a lot of people talked about exploitation of students. I wanted to touch base on why that exploitation is happening. Me and my partner came to New Zealand. Sorry? 3 years back. And first of all, first year we really want to study hard and get the good grades to understand the economy and everything. Second year we struggled to find jobs. It was 1.5 years we struggled to find jobs because no employer was ready. Most of the employers don't want to give jobs to work visa holders, that they don't want to invest their money, time and training into people who hold work visas. We struggled hard, we found temporary jobs, and people with skills with 2 post-graduation, a construction project management person. We worked hard to keep us afloat, and there where the exploitation starts, because we have to do any kind of jobs wherever we get it, any kind of pay wherever we get it. So I want to understand, I'm not sure if you would know that most of the people who come from India, at least I can speak for students coming from India, they have education loans which is at a very high percentage. And we have to start repaying loans, which we have started. And it's pretty hard not to take those jobs when the employers are not ready to give you your skills of jobs. I want to understand for people, for New Zealand being an economy where international students actually contribute about 1/4 of the major contributions, is $5.1 billion, which we bring here. What for future students, you have any plans in your mind for their, when they come here, getting them better visas so that employers can hire them and invest in them so that they can get the jobs they are skilled for?
Look, I'm to be honest with you, I'm not minded to make any changes to the work rights that people get while they are studying. So it's an open work visa. While you're studying, it's an open work visa. There's no limitations on who you can work for. I understand the limitations that the employers themselves will place on it. But it's only 20 hours whilst you're studying. So if you're working more than 20 hours, you're talking about post-study. Well, in that case, I think it ought to work well. You've got a 3-year open work visa. Employers should be looking at that as an opportunity to get someone in at the front door, maybe at a lower level role, and not brilliantly paid when you're straight out of university. We all started somewhere. And I think it's actually not so much about the visa conditions. It's about encouraging employers, and we need to do some work around this, encouraging employers to see the opportunity of investing in young graduates, whether they are young graduates born in New Zealand or young graduates who are here on a visa. Because actually, if you've got a 3-year work visa, it means you've studied at bachelor's or higher. you're well on the way to having a pathway to residency. You're someone that's worth investing in. So I think it's more a communication thing than it is the nature of the visa itself. I do take your point.
Thank you.
There is work in that space, but frankly, I'm just bemused by employers who don't see the opportunity.
Thank you.
Last one, please.
Hello, sir.
Start right back at the beginning.
The thing is, our family has applied residency, and they got it's in the, still in process. They got a child who is 21, but their parents can't afford to pay the fees, which is like more than 13,000, and their visa is about to expire within 2 to 3 months. I was just thinking, what visa they can apply for the child, so that the child can stay with them, rather than sending actually the daughter back to the country where there is no one to look after her. And so, but if something happens to her, who will take the responsibility?
That's a good question for an immigration advisor. As Minister, I can't give advice about what visas people should be applying for. I really encourage you to have a chat with an advisor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galloway. And I think the way we have engaged today, at least my vote will go to him. Do you agree? Fantastic. Just 5 months back, not too long ago, we were the people who were putting a petition in the Parliament. And we had reached some, I think 1,000+ people had already signed, and we were going through that path. But we never liked that path, we like this path. We have had a great engagement, and I can assure you that we will continue on this path. We are gaining ground. If there are more questions, we are more than happy to take them in the association here, and we'll pass them on through Matt. I really appreciate what you have said today. We do have miles to make, and as are some senior leaders here, they have pointed out, we want to come and enjoy and live a life here. It should not be stressful. Actually, we chose New Zealand because this is I think the God's place, they call it. And we all want to be treated same, like as Maoris are so valued people. They came by canoes. Most of the Europeans came by ships, and most of the current immigrants came by planes. And I think that should be the only difference. Rest, we are all of the same land, enjoying and making this culture rich. Thank you again, Minister, and thank you.